Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /Malicious Compliance, where people on purpose follow exact orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, we've got sketchy neighbors, smug bosses, scamming Karen families, all getting taught lessons they won't forget, guys. The stories are so satisfying today. So sit back, relax, grab a drink, and seriously, don't shake your heads too hard today. We're diving in. This tale revolves around my time as a supervisor in a call center. This involves one horrible employee who didn't like me, named James, and my malicious compliance with HR. James was a new hire, probably around 21 at the time. He was a young kid, and you could tell that he grew up privileged and entitled. But hey, I didn't do the hiring, and everyone deserves a chance starting out somewhere. I just wish this guy was hired somewhere else. Now, as a boss, I prided myself as being fair, friendly, and understanding. James, however, was always the victim, and nothing was ever his fault. If a customer complained about his poor service and rudeness, it wasn't his fault. Incorrect information given, he was told the wrong information from someone else, and it was someone else's fault. On and on it went with him. The guy never took accountability for anything. So that all said, the big issue with me came when I had to correct him on a call he took. The information he gave was so incorrect and potentially damaging to the client. I had to call the client back and give them the correct information while apologizing for the misinformation. Company policy at the time caused this to be an automatic write-up. So I bring James into an office, open door mind you, to tell him that he was being written up and why. At first, it started with every excuse in the book, and then it started with him asking why I was being hostile and mean, which I wasn't, and why I was yelling at him. Again, I left the door open on purpose, so there would have been multiple witnesses. At the end of arguing with me, he refused to sign the write-up, which is fine. It would go into his file regardless. As we were done, he marches up to HR to tattle on me. About half an hour later, HR calls me into their office. They asked me why I yelled and cussed at James and threatened him. James had told HR that I was out to get him and that I was targeting him unfairly. I denied this, of course. That's when HR told me that they were throwing out this write-up since to them, it wasn't really a big issue. HR also told me from here on out, if James had an issue or infraction, they would handle it. They clearly sided with James. So I thought, okay, this is where the malicious compliance comes into play. They had zero idea how many side conversations and other crap I had to deal with when it came to James. But nonetheless, I complied. If he needed to call in a sick day, sorry, go talk to HR. If he got a complaint from a customer, I would tell him, go to HR, and I would send them an email why. If he requested a day off to HR you went. It became a fact that HR had to deal with him once or twice a day for months. Anything even slightly minor, I sent him to HR. I know it was driving them insane, as they hated to be bothered. Finally, HR asked me to have a meeting with them. They told me that James called in sick last minute, and he was gonna be put on a final warning, and they wanted me to do it. That's when I remind them that they asked to be put in charge of him. We came to a compromise as I wanted to play nice and said we both would. So with that, James was brought to the office and he was told that he was being put on a final warning for attendance. But of course, playing victim, it wasn't his fault. He cried, he whined, and he said he had to go to the doctor. That's when HR asked for a doctor's note. To which he said he would bring it tomorrow. The next day, James came into HR and he said, you know what, this isn't working out, I quit. HR finally got a hint of what I dealt with, and the trash took itself out. Yeah, I bet OP was ecstatic when they found out that James was quitting. But guys, I honestly can't help but to feel like James was connected to somebody in upper management who was covering for him, because it seems like he got away with a lot, right? And also, I don't think James was the only issue here. Like, if HR thinks something that's an automatic write-up and can be damaging to clients isn't a big issue, maybe you need a new HR, which again is why I think someone was covering for James. And lastly, it's also funny how once they wanted James to provide proof for his claims, he suddenly quits, and to that I say, good riddance. And this person shares a short one that relates to this post. They say, I'm part of a small hiring team at my workplace, and I take my position very seriously. Some time ago, we were looking to fill a key role that required someone sharp, organized, and ready to work under pressure. We had a solid shortlist after several interviews, and that's when my department supervisor pulls me aside. He told me flat out to hire one candidate in particular. Now, not because she was the best fit, but because he wanted me to, because apparently, through rumors, she was a quote, almost girlfriend. Basically, she was somebody he had a crush on and was trying to impress. He said that I should just make it work and he'll take the heat if needed. I refused at first, showing him her results of the interview. She was one of the worst ranked on the list. She was late to the interview, gave out vague answers, couldn't explain basic industry terms, but he wouldn't listen, and he said it was a direct order to hire her. After some back and forth, I actually gave up. I did exactly what he asked. I hired her. I gave her all the support I could, even offered extra onboarding help. Within a month, she accidentally sends a confidential client file to the wrong company, which is a huge uh-oh. Then, she once approved a purchase order for 10 times the budgeted amount, because she obviously didn't read through all those numbers. It was one wrong to another. We lost a major client that brought us millions of dollars over the email slip. Another pulled back on their big contract due to delays on her end. When upper management started asking questions, my manager tried to dodge responsibility. But the thing is, HR already had the hiring records. I made sure all the instructions, including his, were documented, which was intentionally, in case a situation like this came up, and it did. He was reassigned within the quarter, and she quietly disappeared not too long after. Turns out, hiring your crush isn't as cute when the company starts bleeding money. And in this case, huge amounts of money. But talk about a plan backfiring hard though, right? I'm your boss, so hire my crush. OP also didn't come back to update on whether or not they did end up getting together, but honestly, something tells me they didn't, and the guy lost his job and his crush. My goodness. So I have this one neighbor who's a bit of a troublemaker. Here's a bit of backstory. The guy has 4 cars, and he often parks them all on the street, completely filling the street in front of his and my house. When the guy isn't working on his car with air wrenches or washing them with his loud pressure washer, the guy's idling his tow truck for hours. And yes, he has a tow truck too, just rumbling away outside my house. People are constantly coming and going from his house, likely for illicit reasons, but there's no way to prove that. There was a period, though, where police were at his house multiple times a week about 2 years ago, but that has subsided to once every couple of months. One time, he even threatened to run kids over who played basketball in the street because their ball rolls onto his yard. So in short, he's a great guy. So with the backstory over, onto the story. Last week, when I was walking out of my house to take my son to daycare, he comes stomping across the street and he starts being all buddy-buddy with me, so I immediately knew something was up. He then asked if we can keep my dog, a German Shepherd, inside in the morning, because he's tired of my dog waking him up. Now, she's a shepherd, and we let her out in the mornings. She barks at squirrels, birds, you name it. We do limit it as best we can, but a dog is going to dog. So I say sure and continue buckling in my kid. He then continues on, and he says not to take pictures of him or his house. That's when I point to the camera overhead, which is oriented in a way to see my front door, my driveway, and his house. I put it up to keep an eye on him and my property, since the guy's a hothead and I don't trust him not to do something stupid. And then to take the cake, he told me it would be nice if I took those cameras down, as he wants to have more privacy and to stop following his wife. He explained that his wife said that I followed her home multiple times, that if he catches me following her again, he's gonna do something about it. Now, I explained to him that I live across the street, and from time to time, we'll both be coming home at the same time, down the one road that leads to our house, and that I have way better things to do than to follow her home, which I don't. So for the malicious compliance, it comes back to him telling me to keep my dog inside until 7 a.m. so he can get his much needed beauty sleep. Now, instead of leaving her dog door unlocked at night and her going out in the morning when she wakes up, which is usually at 6:30, we lock it at night, and we unlock it on the nose at 7 a.m. But here's the thing, at 7 a.m. when I let her out, I tell her to speak for about 5 minutes. More often than not, she used to go out in the morning to pee and then come back in, but not anymore. Now, she goes out and she barks up a storm for a few minutes. Woof, 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 mother effer. Definitely sounds like OP lives beside a nightmare neighbor and possibly unhinged neighbor. And seriously, with people like him, I would be wary of poking him too much. Like, if the guy has no problem threatening to run kids over for playing in the streets, I wouldn't be surprised if that nutjob starts having malicious thoughts towards OP's dog. With that said, a lot of people are also saying that OP's equally the bad person in this. Like, is it worth disturbing the whole neighborhood by letting your dog bark just to spite one person? Let me know your thoughts, and this person says, so our rental contract, as is normal here, stipulates a quiet period between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. every night, where we're not supposed to be loud. We moved in on a Saturday, and of course, we were unpacking on Sunday, so our new neighbor below us knocked on our door and screamed at us around midday, and told us to read the parts of our contract about the quiet period. So I did, and Sundays aren't mentioned. 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. every day of the week. Nowhere does it state that Sundays are any different, so we carried on. The guys called police on us several times for just doing normal things, such as arranging furniture, walking around, all that stuff. Each time, the guy would lie to the cops, making it sound like we were the bad guys. The reasons included things like dropping things too often and using the stairs at night. These reasons are of course ridiculous, but each time, I've just shown them the contract which all the residents signed. If he has signed the contract, then he consents to me making noise during these periods. I checked with our other neighbors to see if they had any complaints about our noise level, and they all said no. After he called the police several times, I decided to begin malicious compliance. I went down to the neighbor with a copy of the house rules, which we've all signed, and I told him to please read them, specifically the exact times which are the quiet period, and then, for the next week or so, any hammering, drilling, or loud things I had to do, I saved for 9:50 p.m. Even if I didn't have anything I needed to do, I just made sure to make noise right up until 10 p.m. After I did this for about a week, we stopped hearing from him, and I haven't had any noise complaints since, and it's been several months now. Recently, a couple of heavy metal fans have moved into the apartment next to him, and I couldn't be happier. So this was, and still is, my personal favorite story of malicious compliance, delivered by yours truly. Here's some backstory. This particular customer's address and phone number still haunts me to this day, because they either full-on stiffed me or underpaid for every single delivery I ever made for them. To make things worse, they were on the very edge of our delivery area, which was a 20-mile radius. I was around 20 to 22 years old, driving a 1988 Jeep Cherokee as a pizza delivery vehicle for a company whose logo is a very popular table game in the US prison system. Tips were very important to my survival, as it literally paid for the gas I needed to do my job, because the company refused to pay mileage and fuel costs. On to the story. So this night, my manager and I are wrapping up, and we're getting ready to call it a night after a dead shift when the phone rings 2 minutes before closing time. It's that family, and they're calling for their 2 veggie pizzas with grilled chicken. Another thing, the owners of this franchise were very strict, and they have full access to the call logs in the store. So they will know if we don't answer before closing and take the order. It would be firing time if we didn't answer. So the order's taken, and I proceed to drive half an hour to the house to find out that they aren't home. So I call the number they have listed for deliveries. No answer. So I try the secondary number, and that leads me straight to voicemail. At this point, I figure that I'll go back to the Jeep with the pizzas still in the heat bag to make sure they stay safe and warm while I call the manager to see what I should do. My manager answers, and I quote, he says, "You aren't gonna like this. They're demanding you to leave the pizza on the doorstep because you didn't get it there fast enough." They went to the pizza place down the street from their house. And at that moment, I was mad because it was way past my shift. I responded, "On their doorstep? Okay, cue malicious compliance." Now, they didn't say how to leave the pizza, so in a fit of pizza-driven rage, I dumped that veggie pizza face down on the doorstep, and I proceed to stomp it into the concrete. I left with a feeling of meaningful bliss, and when I got back to the store, we permanently blacklisted that address and phone number. If someone's using their time and fuel to bring you food, effing tip them. Yeah, some people might argue that that was a bit extreme, but I do understand why OP did what they did. Like, people that do that kind of stuff are so freaking scummy, guys, and I'm glad they didn't get to enjoy that free pizza like they intended. That said, I'm also shocked that being such a large chain, that family didn't go to corporate and raise hell about what happened. But that's probably because they knew they were being scummy, and deep down, they knew they deserved it. And this person comments and says, "Some people would deliberately order and not answer like this to get free pizza." I had a friend who delivered in college who just kept empty pizza boxes in his car. If he ever had a no-show or no answer, he would slip most of the pizza into a clean box for his dinner later, and he would just leave the most ragged slices in the original box open on the doorstep. This was way before door cameras. If they complained, he would just say that he left the pizza on the doorstep for them, and it wasn't his fault if it got stolen by neighbors' kids before they could get to it. Some people are absolutely brilliant, I tell you. And this one user shares a story that relates, and they say, "So back in the early 2000s, I was a waiter at a famous red-roofed pizza shack. This was way before they went downhill and closed the dining rooms. One night, the teenage dishwasher got caught selling drugs to other employees, and he was fired on the spot by the newly minted manager. No one was tasked with doing dishes after that, and bus tubs of dishes were piling up, and people started setting them on the floor. I went back to set some dishes on the pile, and I turned back to go to the dining room, and that's when I twisted my knee. My leg got lodged between 2 tubs left on the floor. I just heard a crunch and fell. I sat on the floor in pain and then tried to get up and put weight on it with little success. That's when the manager sees me and told me that I had to continue serving pizza because I was the only waiter and I would be fired if I didn't. And here's my malicious compliance. So with that, I hopped. I would hop from the kitchen window to the tables, serving every pizza. Of course, customers asked what happened, and I told them exactly what happened and why I was still serving while hopping. They were angry, and one even confronted the manager. Finally, I got so sick of the hopping that I called my girlfriend to come get me. On the way out the door, the manager said, "You'd better get a doctor's note or else you're fired." I went to the ER and I end up having a torn meniscus and ACL damage. My mom was pissed, and she decides to contact a lawyer, and a year and a half later, I won a $10,000 settlement from the company. The first thing I did when I cashed that check was have a huge pizza party with all my friends in that same restaurant. So this happened a long time ago, and I thought I'd share. I used to work for a pharmaceutical compounding company. Now, pharmaceutical compounding factories are made up of several rooms of varying cleanliness. The rooms are graded from D to A, D being the least clean. These rooms are thoroughly cleaned each day, but they require special deep cleans at least once a month. When this happened, I was scheduled to work in the D box room, which is a grade D room, where I would take drugs, devices out of their boxes, and record the relevant numbers from each individual item before cleaning with 70% alcohol and sending through an airlock hatch into a grade C room. However, this day, the grade C room attached to the D box room was being deep cleaned and couldn't be used until the next day, meaning there was literally nothing to debox. I asked my manager Lisa, the Karen, where they wanted me to work, and the conversation went as follows. I basically say, "Hi Lisa, since there's nothing in debox, should I go and help with the deep clean, or go to Unit A or B? A different set of clean rooms?" She asked, "What does it say on the schedule?" I tell her, it says D box, but there's nothing in there, and I don't want to spend hours standing around. That's when Lisa says, "Well, if it says D box, then go D box. It's that simple. Why did you even need to ask me?" I tell her, "Lisa, there's a deep clean happening. There's literally nothing to do in D box." She responds, "There's plenty to do in there, so go do it. I can't believe I'm having this conversation with you. Just do what you're told." So with that, I went into D-Box. The contents of the room were an empty bin, a bottle of 70% alcohol, some wipes, and myself. So I cleaned the room with the alcohol, which took 15 minutes, and then stood still for 2 hours. Over the intercom, the people doing the deep clean asked what I was doing. I just relayed to them the conversation I had with Lisa. I got a laugh, and they said, "Honestly, that's not surprising. She's a bitch." I then proceed to stand still for another hour. So after being stationary for 3 whole hours, Lisa barges into the room, and she screams and says, "What on earth do you think you're doing? You've done nothing but stare at the wall for 3 hours. What makes you think you can get away with doing nothing when everyone else is working so hard?" That's when I tell Lisa, I'm just doing what you asked me to do, Lisa. You told me to." She then stops me and says, "This isn't what I asked you to do. Did I ask you to stand around for 3 effing hours? I told you to come in here and do your work." I respond, "And I told you there was no work in here to do, and I asked to go somewhere where there was work." She then says, "There was work to do when I sent you in here." I told her, "No, there wasn't. I wouldn't have asked for something to do if there was something to do." At this point, she screams even louder and she says, "Get out and go to Unit A. If you ever repeat this stunt, I will investigate you for gross misconduct." I just tell her, if doing what you asked me to do is gross misconduct, then you should probably investigate this particular incident. At this point, I just walked past her and went and did my job in the other units. Later, I was chatting to the supervisor who had been sat with her on the monitoring station. They told me that she had watched me on the camera for the entire 3 hours, getting progressively more and more wound up. There never ended up being an investigation, and that manager entirely stopped talking to me until she tried and failed to fire me for totally different reasons, and she ended up getting let go. What a great malicious compliance that was, and seriously, some people just can't admit when they're wrong. Like, I just love how she claimed there was work in the room when she knew darn well there wasn't. Gotta love that, right? You stood there for 3 hours doing nothing? Well, Karen, you sat there for 3 hours knowingly watching me do nothing. And this comment wins, guys. This person says, worst unboxing video she's ever seen. My former employer was a wealth of these, so here's one for you. I had been working contentedly for a local clinic in administrative capacity. I was hired on as a medical biller originally, but over time, my duties expanded into more information management and upper-level administration. Everyone from the CEO to the most junior employee knew that I was good at my job. I didn't brag, but my work spoke for me. One of the certifying organization's motto for billers is upholding a higher standard, and I was doing my best to abide by it. Things were perking along, and that's when the clinic merged with a larger group of clinics, and they had a centralized billing office. I was on site more often than not, and I knew the clinic operations backwards and forwards, as I was functioning as the de facto manager. So here's the issue. As the merger took effect, I realized that I didn't mix with the central office at all. They were rude, cliquey, and apparently it was known, but nothing was ever done about it. When I refused an order to commit a fraudulent act, after the weekend, I came back to a new set of job duties, all front desk. I was beyond peeved because it was effectively a demotion, and when I spoke with the manager, she said flat out, "You're now front desk staff, and you're bound by the expectations of such." So I thought to myself, okay, demote me for acting honorably, this cannot go unanswered. I was beyond furious, but I had a lot of institutional knowledge and a lot of unofficial duties. If they were going to put me back on front desk and be bound by that set of expectations, then I was going to give them a master's class on work to rule. And here's another thing. This change in position was not communicated to the clinic manager. And when I told him, he said, "What are they thinking?" But he didn't have enough work for me as a front desk person, so I spent my days job searching on the clock. It's not something I would recommend, but it was either that or be bored out of my skull all day long. Every time I was asked a billing question, I just said, "I'm not the biller. You need to take it up with the central billing office." After a few weeks, the central billing office caught on, as I was adding more work back on them, and they tried to give me a few tasks back. I used the customer service rule to argue against it, and they had to admit I had a point. When the original CEO found out what was going on, he called it a waste. I suspect words were said, and I got a large portion of my job back within the hour. So not only did I give them a well-deserved education on why one doesn't mess with a good employee, but I also got paid to job hunt for my next position. Also, OP did comment to add that they did end up moving on from that company after a short while, and they did make a formal report about what their boss was having them do. And in the end, their former boss was indicted. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled People episode, where a psycho Karen allows her daughter to break someone's hand. It's such a wild episode, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.